today deliberate and decide on a range of matters relevant to the work of council in its communities for the welfare of the people of the Pyrenees Shire. As the meeting chair, I give my consent for this ordinary council meeting to be streamed live, recorded and published online. Anyone who is invited to read out a question or make a submission will be recorded, and their voice, image and comments will form part of that live stream and recording. The chair and or the CEO have the discretion and authority at any time to direct the termination or interruption of live streaming. Such direction will only be given in exceptional circumstances where deemed appropriate. That may include where the content of debate is considered misleading, defamatory, or potentially inappropriate to be published. The live stream will stop prior to the closed section of the meeting and will recommence for the conclusion of the meeting. Public is able to view this live stream via our website at www.pyrenees.vic.gov.au. Should technical issues prevent the continuation of the live stream, the meeting will continue as long as a quorum can be maintained, and where possible, a recording of the meeting will be published on Council's website. Where a quorum cannot be maintained, the meeting will be adjourned until the issue is resolved or the meeting postponed to another time and date in accordance with Council's governance rules. We acknowledge the people past and present of the Wadawurrung, Dja Dja Wurrung, Eastern Ma and Watchabalek tribes whose land forms the Pyrenees Shire. We pay our respect to the customs, traditions and stewardship of the land by the elders and people of these tribes on whose land we meet today. As there are no apologies, are there any notice of disclosure of interest by councillors or officers? Councillor Clark. Thank you, Councillor Clark. Any further? No? I'll ask for a motion for the confirmation of the previous minutes I held on the 20th of August 24 and the closed council held on the 20th of August 24 as previously circulated to councillors. Be confirmed. Move Councillor Ferrari. Seconded Councillor Keogh. All those in favour? Thank you. And it's carried. Any business arising, councillors? If no, thank you. The public participation. Members of the community are encouraged to participate in public ordinary council meetings by asking questions or presenting a submission. This can be done by attending in person or by submitting in writing prior to 12 noon on the day of the meeting, online through council's website or by mail or hand delivered. If a question or submission is submitted in writing, this will be read by the chair during public participation, stating the person's name and township. Question time will be held first, followed by public submissions. 30 minutes is allowed for the total period of public participation. Time extensions may be allowed at the discretion of the chair, subject to the provisions of the governance rules. Person may ask a maximum of 2 questions at any one meeting. The chair will allocate a maximum of 5 minutes to each person who wishes to address council or ask questions. The chair, councillor or council officer to whom a question is referred may immediately answer the question or take the question on notice for answering at a later date. There will be no discussion or debate with public attendees. However, councillors may ask questions of the attendee for clarification. So I would at this stage ask if there are any questions from the floor.
You've got more jackets than me.
No, you can first.
Okay.
Thank you, Ferrar.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was wondering, with the exception of executives and salary sacrifice agreements, does the vehicles of the council get used on weekends by staff or overnight or take home or anything like that? Thank you.
Mr. CEO, I guess you choose to answer that question.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Mr. David, for that question. Council, in attracting and retaining staff at a senior officer level, have a number of arrangements in place that are negotiated at the time of recruitment, and we have a small number of senior officers that have entitlements to private use of a council vehicle for which they salary sacrifice amount of their remuneration. And so as private use, they have entitlements to for use within certain parameters. And we have a light vehicle policy which sets out those arrangements. In addition to that, we have work supervision staff that have access to vehicles to attend emergency activities. So in the event of storm and floods and whatnot, if there are requirements to sort of respond, then that work can happen on weekends, and there are arrangements in place for appropriate use of those vehicles for that purpose.
Ms. Levy.
I have two questions. Firstly, I'd like to ask, are towns in the Shire grouped into clusters within wards?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for that question, Ms. Levy. Generally, the answer to the question, generally not. Generally, towns are treated on an individual basis, but by and large, council considers them in the context of the overall benefit of the Shire when it does its planning, but doesn't necessarily look at them in clusters as such. There may be occasions where it's convenient and efficient to do some activities in a cluster, not necessarily based on ward. And in the case of Snake Valley, Lexington and Waubra, council made a decision a little while ago to undertake a framework plans. So this was a planning exercise where we developed those framework plans for those three small towns because they had like characteristics, and those plans were prepared at the same time and they were submitted as part of a planning scheme amendment concurrently. So that's an example where those towns were clustered for that purpose because they had like characteristics and it was efficient to do so. But not all of those towns are actually within the same ward. I can't think of other examples where we might have done that, but generally they're not necessarily grouped under a ward basis.
So today I nominated as a candidate for the Decameron ward, committing to meeting with a different town each month. This to listen to their needs, concerns and interests, to further co-facilitate their strengths, goals, visions and emergency plans, then to utilise these to develop clear step-by-step reflective action processes. And in looking at your small town's role, Jim, which is wonderful that you're going to be submitting because of the election process, I'm wondering, with me as a facilitator who actually had a plan for the Evansford Community Centre a couple of decades ago, how that will impact me as a candidate if you're putting in for funds. Like, for instance, could you draw on that Evansford Community Centre arts grant and plan that we had if I'm a candidate, not in that ward, but in another, etc. And also my employment as a facilitator if I'm not elected later. How does all that work?
Thank you for that question. And there's a number of elements to the question. Essentially, members of the community that nominate to be a candidate for election are required to satisfy a number of requirements to be eligible to nominate. Should the candidate become elected and become a councillor, then a matter of interest and conflicts of interest is a matter that needs to be managed in the situations that you've outlined or others. It's expected that most councillors that become councillors are active in the community in some way or another. Yes. And that's why they put their hand up to nominate to be councillors. And as such, it's not unusual for councillors to have interests, and those interests, however, need to be declared. And so there's a process for declaring interests, and it's appropriate to declare those interests for the sake of transparency for the community, and also to ensure that councillors remove themselves from any decision-making and discussion on those issues for which they have a conflict of interest. So, and that's part of the process. It's not insurmountable, but it needs to be managed, those interests. So where you've had some involvement in activities in the past where it is the subject of a council decision. In respect of your comments around community plans, most of our townships have some form of community plan, whether it be a framework plan or a community plan that's been developed over years. And these plans are used to support grant applications. It actually, in many cases, it's necessary for us to be able to demonstrate community engagement and community buy-in when we apply for grants. And so those community plans, regardless of who they've been prepared by, actually are often used in that regard, whether it be by council or by the communities themselves. It doesn't necessarily exempt a person from participating as a councillor if they've had some involvement in council activities in the past, but it's a matter of managing those conflicts of interest where they occur.
Thank you. No.
Excuse me.
Ms. Bramwell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And following on from the CEO's very good response to that, I just wanted to make it clear that even though wards are elected in one specific ward, even though councillors are elected in one specific ward, you're elected for the benefit of the entire Shire, not just for one ward. So that actually doesn't come into it so much. Thank you.
Good retort. Thank you. No further questions? Mr. Kirsten.
I've just cracked 40 years residence in the Shire, so this is a special time. And it also coincides with the fact that, Mr. Mayor, Mr. Robert Vance, it's an opportunity for me to say thank you for very much that you've done for a number of organisations I've been involved with. Community grants. From time to time, the council makes available community grants. Where does the money for that come from? For example, is it come out of the ratepayers' collection of funds, or does it come from some grant source, or is it a combination of both?
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kersnov. It's always good for ratepayers to know where their money actually goes. And in the case of community grants, and you're right, council approximately twice a year invites submissions from the community, from community organisations to apply for these community grants. And there's a range of community grants from community capital grants for events, for youth activities, and a range of other appropriate things that happen in the community. There's approximately $90,000 allocated in council's budget towards these community grants, and they're distributed, as you've seen in the past, through a process where people apply, council consider those applications and consider them on the merits and then allocate that funding. So essentially that funding comes out of council's budget. Now, when council prepares budget, there are a range of sources of revenue that council has. Approximately $10 million of council's revenue comes from rates. and that goes into council's pool of revenue. Council also receives from the federal government approximately $7 million in federal assistance grants. So these federal assistance grants are in the form of a general grant and specifically for roads. So in respect of the general grant, those funds can go into council's general revenue and can be used and distributed for whatever purpose council deems appropriate. So when it comes to the expenditure side of the council budget, those funds that are used for community grants come out of council's general revenue base. So essentially, they are effectively either ratepayer funds or funds from the general federal assistance grants component. But we don't distinguish one or the other, essentially. It is money that council has at its discretion that it chooses to allocate for community grants because that's an appropriate thing to do. Now, there are occasionally exceptions to the rule where there is a special provision made by council, and at a recent council meeting, council made a decision to support a process which will see the distribution of community funds being distributed for fire-affected individuals, and those funds actually came from the Stockyard Hill wind farm. So the wind farm actually committed $50,000 towards supporting affected bushfire community, and council assisted in the distribution of that by using a process where we invited applications from affected landowners and people that were impacted by the fire, and those funds have been distributed. So that didn't come from ratepayers, and it didn't come from council's general revenue. It was a corporate donation that was distributed using a council process. I hope that helps.
Yep.
Sorry, just a brief follow-up. Is there some sort of regulatory requirement regarding that mixture of ratepayers' money put into a bucket, which also has grant money coming in as well and gets mixed up? Is there a regulatory requirement by Act of Parliament or regulation that controls the way in which councils allocate their funds?
There's no regulatory requirement that I'm aware of that council has to use any external funds to match its ratepayer funds. No, it's at council's discretion. Yeah. In terms of the criteria that council uses to evaluate applications from the community, there is a weighting that provides an advantage to a community organisation that would put some of its own funds as a contribution to secure a council community grant, which makes sense that the community has raised some of its own funds. It might be more positively viewed by the council in distributing those, but there's no regulatory requirement from my understanding. Thank you.
Thank you for those questions, and Mr. Kirstenoff, thank you for your generous compliment. Much appreciated. We move into corporate and community services. Items for noting. Somebody prepared to move 9.1.1. Move Councillor Keogh, seconded Councillor Clark. All those in favour? That is carried. Move along to item 10.1, councillor activity reports. Move Councillor Beeson, seconded Councillor Ferrari. All in favour? That is carried. Item 11.1, Assembly of Councillors. Moved Councillor Clark, seconded Councillor Keogh. All in favour? That is carried. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, I might just point out that Councillor Easton has identified an error in those notes, and we'll correct that as part of the agenda, part of the minutes.
Thank you.
And it's essentially that.
Right. Yes.
So there's an administrative error.
Just a slight error. Okay. For those people that are not able to have a agenda in front of them, councillor Easton has been named as the current mayor in that item. Item 12.1, Asset and Development Services. Item for the decision. Councillor Clark is leaving the room. Thank you, Councillor Clark. We have a recommendation. Councillors, somebody prepared to
Just allow the officer to speak to the issue.
Right, sorry. Yeah. Thank you. Mr. Gowans.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Been a long day.
That's okay. I'm happy to whip through these reports. Purpose of this report is to seek council support for undertaking further investigations into management options for the Crown Land Water Reserve in Walbra. The council received a letter from the Walbra Wind Farm Community Fund seeking support of council to obtain management responsibility for both the water reserve and associated access. The community group sought to be able to commence work on a project to restore the original town water reserve in Walbra into a park recreation area, as well as to provide emergency water facilities at the site for firefighting purposes. The group envisaged that this will be a multi-year project which will create a significant recreational asset over time for the Walbra community. The water reserve is a Crown Land reserve currently managed by the Department of Energy, Environment and Climate Action. The reserve is shown on the associated map. The letter from the Walbra Wind Farm Community Fund stated that it is the intention for the Community Fund to be the long-term manager of the reserve for public purposes. Council also directly heard from Mr. Barry Davidson from the Walbra CFA at the Council Community Cuppa in July, who also raised his intent to gain access to the site and support the development of the site in line with the community proposal. Council's Environment and Sustainability Officer met Mr. Davidson on site following some initial access work that had been undertaken. The site is generally overgrown with invasive introduced species, but does have some small areas of potentially native vegetation. Duns Road has now been constructed to a basic level to provide direct access to the Crown Land Water Reserve. The Walbra Water Reserve is presently DECA's direct responsibility. Approval to use the reserve for the purposes intended by the community will need to be arranged with DECA. This may take the form of an association or other entity becoming the Committee of Management of the Reserve through DECA. Council could consider seeking the parcel of land to be transferred to the management responsibility of council as per the community request. Public works on Crown land within Walbra is also subject to the requirements of the Dja Dja Wurrung Clans Aboriginal Corporation Land Use Activity Agreement. The intended use and access to the site would require application and approval from the corporation, which may include the requirement for the preparation of a cultural heritage management plan prior to commencing work. In order for council to make an informed decision regarding future management of the water reserve, a number of steps and considerations are listed in the report. And these include assessing the Walbra Township plan alignment in respect to the submission in relation to increasing the access to public land, public amenity improvement, open space enhancement and historic site preservation. And all these things are actually listed in the township plan. Understanding if there is a need for additional static water supply tanks for firefighting purposes within proximity to Walbra. Understanding DECA's current responsibility for weed control and current and planned land management actions for the reserve. As mentioned earlier, the land use activity agreement investigations and permissions, capital and operational cost considerations for site development and maintenance, noting the initial community fund commitment, safety considerations and liabilities regarding wells on the site, and traffic management requirements. While the risks to council are considered manageable, it is nonetheless appropriate for council to be in a position to make an informed decision. Once the above matters are given further consideration, council may choose to seek to take on the management of reserve as a DECA-appointed committee of management, with the view to delegating responsibility for the maintenance to a local committee or body. Council would need to consider the merits and liabilities of taking management responsibility of the Walbra Water Reserve. The management responsibility could be assisted by the council enacting a Crown Land Asset Committee to manage both community and council interests. The Waubra Water Reserve has the potential to provide greater opportunities for open space, public amenity, firefighting infrastructure and historic interest. Council needs to consider whether taking on management responsibilities is the best way forward to enable the community proposal. Therefore, it's the officer recommendation that Council writes to the Department of Energy, Environment and Climate Action to seek direct action by DECA to remove invasive weeds from the Waubra Water Reserve. The Council gives in principle support to work with the community to progress the restoration of the reserve as outlined in the report. And the Council undertakes further investigation into relevant aspects associated with possible transfer of the management of the Waubra Water Reserve to Council and report the outcomes to a future meeting of Council.
There we go. We've heard the officer recommendation. Somebody prepared to move? Councillor Easton, seconded Councillor Keogh. You wish to speak for the party? No? I'll put the recommendation then. Those in favour? That's carried. So Councillor Clark back, please. Item 12.1.2, the Maloney Road and Bridge Condition Assessments. Once again, thank you, Mr. Gowans.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The purpose of this report is to obtain council endorsement for the Maloney Asset Management Systems methodology and forecasting in undertaking road and bridge condition surveys. This report addresses the assessment of bridges. The 2024 Bridges Condition Survey was undertaken on all 158 bridges within the municipality that council has responsibility for. The 158 bridge assets were found to be in good to fair overall condition, with an improvement in overall condition of 15% since the last condition survey in 2018. There are only two structures assessed as being condition 8, which is on the scale of Maloney, 0 being brand new, 10 being at the end of its life. And these were on Bridge 7 on Back Cemetery Road and the jetty at the Beaufort Lake Caravan Park. These structures are identified in Council's 10-year asset plan for replacement. The overall condition of all bridges has improved as a result of the large-scale structure bridge replacements that have occurred during the last 5 years. The report recommends renewal funding over the next 5 years of just over $400,000 per annum. It also recommends maintenance funding be lifted by $40,000 for the next 2 to 5 years to address urgent work. The report recommends load limits ranging from 20 to 30 tonnes to be imposed on 13 bridges. The replacement value of council's bridges is calculated to be $70 million. Council's 10-year asset plan has programmed bridge replacement based on Maloney's asset condition assessment and will replace or upgrade the majority of structures assessed as condition 6.5 or above by the end of the 26-27 financial year. Council is achieving good results in its management of bridge assets. This report makes recommendations as to the ongoing funding levels for asset renewal in these classes. Therefore, it's the officer recommendation that Council endorses the findings of the Maloney Asset Management Systems Roads and Bridges report, that Council supports the continued use of the Maloney Asset Management Systems methodology and financial forecasting, and that Council reflects the report recommendations for funding of asset classes in Council's long-term financial plan.
Thank you, Mr. Gowans. Move Councillor Clark, seconded Councillor Keogh. Councillor Clark, you wish to speak?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just to add to Mr. Gowans' comments, I think it's very important. I see, Mr. Gowans, by the report, we've got a couple more bridges this year that we can bring to in culverts, which will save us money in the long term and make them durable. Is that something that we hope we'll be able to continue kind of most years as we move through the 158 of them that we've got?
Thank you, Councillor Clark, for your question. And it is Council's intention to make sure that if we are replacing a bridge, we're both looking at the financial implication of the replacement and the longevity of the replacement. And both a bridge or culvert, a culvert generally has less long-term maintenance, and generally, and it is a general statement that generally culverts cost less than bridge asset replacement. There are sometimes circumstances where the market doesn't quite reflect that, and that's why we continue to test the market on outcomes from time to time. But council has a long list that we're working through, but I think this report clearly shows that we're prioritising the right bridges at the right time, and we're getting in front of the asset renewal that we need to.
Any further comments, councillors? The only comment I would make is the wisdom of council to continue to use the Maloney group to assess our bridges. It's been very successful in the past. I'm sure it'll carry us well into the future. I'll put the recommendation. Those in favour? That is carried. Thank you. Moving on to 12.1.3, neighbourhood safer places. Once again, Mr. Gowans.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The purpose of this report is for council to note the outcome of neighbourhood safer places assessments for the coming fire season. Just a reminder for everyone that a neighbourhood safer place is a space that is the place of last resort for individuals to access and shelter in during a fire event affecting their neighbourhood without the need to take a high-risk journey beyond their neighbourhood. The neighbourhood safer place is also a place that eliminates direct exposure to flames from a fire front and management of radiant heat to survivable levels. And it's also a space that should only be assessed when personal bushfire survival plans cannot be implemented or have failed. Council currently has 9 designated neighbourhood places, and they're listed in the report, and they're in the townships of Lexden, Warburg, Beaufort, Snake Valley, Avoca, Moonambell, Nattyalec, Redbank and Landsborough. All these locations were assessed by the CFA and deemed to be compliant with the CFA assessment guidelines. The public may be interested to know that we obviously have more than 9 towns in the Shire. And why don't we have neighbourhood safer places in those towns? And it's not for want of trying. Council has many times looked at providing a neighbourhood safer place, but it needs to meet the requirements that the CFA set. And unfortunately, in our other townships, the ability to either find that safe place or meet the assessment criteria has not been able to be met. So it's fair to say we do have a high bushfire risk within the Pyrenees Shire, and that people need to be aware in those high-risk environments, including these towns, but all of our towns, that you need to have a bushfire survival plan and make sure that you're able to enact it. And if the message is to leave early, leave early. The officer recommendation is that council notes this report and that council publishes the list of approved neighbourhood safer places on council's website.
Yeah. Move councillor Keogh, seconded councillor Eason. Any questions, councillor? Councillor Eason.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a point from our fires in February. The Avoca safer place is the median street in High Street. And with the fires in February, the ABC were advising people in Lamplauw and Amphitheatre and whatever to move to Avoca. And instead of going to the median strip, they went to the footy ground because they were advised to take their animals and were expecting to be able to find facilities to give them water and maybe make a cup of tea or whatever. So I just want to highlight the fact that that happened in the last fire, and we didn't have imminent fire in these areas. But the safer place in Avoca doesn't provide facilities for people that come in. When they go to a rec reserve, they generally expect there to be coffee and tea and so forth. So just mention that in any planning going forward, the footy ground area now has removed a lot of trees that made it unsafe. It may need to be reassessed.
Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, just in relation to that comment, and it's a really valid point that Councillor Eason makes there. I think we need to make sure that the messaging about the neighbourhood safer place it's about enacting, that should be in your personal survival plan. If your local neighbourhood is under threat and you've stayed to defend and that plan effectively has failed, then you move to neighbourhood safer place. Neighbourhood safer place is not a place of emergency refuge. It's not, if you have a radio message or a message from the CFA app or the clear messaging from the emergency services, you need to follow that advice, and that advice generally will be about where the safe area to move to is. So we need to make sure that we break this nexus between the confusion around what a neighbourhood safe will provide. It actually has no facilities. It's not about facilities, it's about the survival in a fire front, but an emergency evacuation point, you need to follow the messaging for any particular event. Yeah.
Whilst you're on your feet, the status of the request from Barclay?
Yeah, so Barclay has been assessed, and we have had to enter into a plan to undertake works. My understanding is that yeah, it should be on that list. So there is a 10th place, but there's prescribed works that we need to do. So it's not an as of right, but we do have a neighbourhood safe place in Barclay, and I think that information is reflected on our website as well. And it's remiss of me not having.
Whilst you're there, Crowlands, is there?
There is not a
Something
safe
in
place in Crowlands. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Gowans. I'll put the motion. Those in favour? That is carried. Capital Works report. Mr. Gowans, once again, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This report outlines the completed capital works projects over the last 4 years between 2020 and 2024. And the report also includes the proposed 24-25 capital works program in detail. The attachments to this report provide the individual project detail and distribution of projects across the Shire. The distribution across the Shire is influenced by several factors, including larger one-off infrastructure works like the Lexton Hub project, bridges located more in the southern part of the Shire, poorer road pavement subgrades affecting the condition of roads in the southern part of the Shire, and an unequal length of roads within each ward. To provide the best outcome to the community, capital works projects are continually assessed against community need, asset management principles, strategic value, and cost benefit before being added to the capital works program. And you'll see there in the reports that over the last 4 years, including this year, we'll be spending nearly $39 million on capital works relating to bridges and roads. The report details all the anticipated projects. I won't go through them and list each one, but they're there in the report. And obviously the total value being 38.9 million on capital works over the past 4 years, including this year, is a significant proportion of council's budget. It provides the public and community with assets that are maintained to provide an ongoing service level or improved level of service where funding is available. And the officer recommendation is that council acknowledges the program of major capital works delivered over the past 4 years, and that council endorses the delivery of the capital works program for 2024-25 financial year and beyond as outlined in this report.
Thank you, Mr. Gowan. Somebody prepared to move to such? Councillor Eason. Second to Councillor Clark. He wishes to speak. Thank you, Councillor Eason.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We often make decisions on $1 million, $500,000, $75,000 for projects as we go through our budgetary process. It's rare that we get a $38 million figure to marvel at when you look at what we spend to try and keep our roads in a semblance of satisfactory condition. And it's interesting to look over the period as this report gives us. $38 million is well spent if we continue to be able to travel around our Shire.
Thank you for those comments. Any further comment? Councillor Clark.
Yeah, thanks, Mr Mayor. Just to echo Councillor Easton's comments, I think it is a really significant part. 25% of what we get as a budget we spend in capital works on roads, and we need to in that sense. Mr Gowans gave us a map earlier, and I'm sorry most people won't be able to read that. It's got lots and lots of lines on it to show you where we've done our works, but there's a hell of a lot of gaps, which shows what happens when you've got 2,000 kilometres of roads and only $6.5 million a year. So I think we're doing really good work. We just need to keep at it and look forward to some more money in the next couple of budgets, which will help significantly.
Absolutely. No further comments, councillors? I'll put the motion. Those in favour? Carried. Thank you. 12.2.1. Ms Bramwell.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. This report provides an update to the council and community on recovery activities arising from the October-November 2022 flood events and the February 2024 fire event, and it relates to activities between October last year and August. The recovery continues, of course, with a strong focus on supporting community recovery and building resilience for the future. And it includes a rehabilitation of the infrastructure, including roads, culverts, floodways, and now guardrail, guideposts and signage to make our public assets once again safe for users. And the attached recovery plans, there's two recovery plans, one of course for the flood in 2022 and a new one for the fire earlier this year, details the status. And the majority of the actions remain ongoing and will be for some time. But some of the key outcomes have been included since the last report, include a range of health and wellbeing programmes for the community, including Ballarat Community Health and Grampians Community Health, combining with our staff on a community resilience and recovery programme. Council's community development team visiting with residents and with community recovery officer to provide outreach support. Regular meetings with DECA to coordinate recovery efforts on private and public land. And the Heart project, which is called Healing with Art, commenced recently with 30 people attending the first workshop, which is a really great result. That's organised by local artists, supported by council. And there's quite a few of other activities that are going on, but it also includes asset programmes as well as the health and wellbeing programmes and future resilience building works, such as building a community recovery network, our bushfire recovery planning programme, which means our planning staff are working with residents on those who need to rebuild. And that's a programme that's being held at the moment. And also, as was mentioned earlier in an earlier report, flood mitigation options that are ongoing to try and mitigate the impacts of flood on some of our townships. So there's quite a lot of work that our council officers are doing at the moment. Just one of the other notable things that is going to be coming up in the very near future is that planning is underway to establish a community recovery network to coordinate any community-led recovery efforts, so put some of the power back into residents' hands. With regards to financial implications, of course, council faces significant financial risk if the recovery effort is not managed well, and we do require ongoing support from Commonwealth and state governments, particularly with reimbursement of claims and expenditure to do the recovery works. At the moment, to date, the flood cost us just over 4.8 million. The fire so far has cost us almost 2.1 million. We've had 4.6 million back, mostly for flood reimbursements. So, although council does receive some funding up front, the level of expenditure council incurs results in us having to cash flow. At the moment, it comes to just over 2.2 million as at the end of June, and that's a significant level of funds for council to have to carry before we get the money back. So it does impact on being able to deliver over the programmes, maybe on a temporary basis. So to date, $3.9 million of claims have been submitted. for the flood claims, of which only 0.3 million has been approved so far. So it is an important thing for us. So although progress has been made in key recovery areas, council officers are active with recovery and resilience building initiatives. And though there's been a fire and council staff have been providing support to those affected, work does continue to support those still affected by the floods, long-term recovery effort there. And council officers would like to take this opportunity to thank all community members, businesses and organisations that have helped with the recovery efforts so far. Recovery is a big task and takes time, and efforts are very much appreciated. And it's the officer's recommendation that council notes the progress made against required recovery action in the flood recovery plan and the bushfire recovery plan, and continues to advocate to government in respect of the disaster recovery funding arrangements and for further funding to provide long-term support for individuals, communities and businesses to recover well and build resilience. Thank you.
Move councillor Keogh, seconded councillor Eason. Comments, councillor Keogh?
Yes, thanks, Mr. Mayor. Just again, I would like to reiterate that thanks to the amazing community members, the businesses and organisations that have helped with the recovery efforts. It wouldn't happen without all of those, but also thank you very much to all the officers within council that have been able to coordinate that and link people to others. And I think that's such a powerful effort. And you know, we keep thinking of all those people that are still going through those motions, but we're very grateful for that, and it's looking promising. There's a lot of work that goes into receiving those grants back, a lot of work, and we're very grateful for that too. So thank you.
Councillor Keogh.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Unfortunately, I see this report as a very sad indictment of the state and federal governments. We currently have outstanding over $2 million waiting for the funds to be returned from our higher ups. If council's spending $2 million of their money, our work as council is not being done. The work that is required to get our people back able to move around the Shire and work is certainly something that is far more important than having delays of months and months and months. So although I give, same as councillor Keogh, all the community members that have got involved, helping everybody get back on their feet and so forth, we're certainly hanging around by our fingernails waiting for the federal government and the state government to put the money that they promise when they come and take the microphone when the cameras are on.
Thank you, councillor Eason. Any further comments, councillors? I'll put the motion. Those in favour, that is carried. Item 12.3.1, Mr. Nolan, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The purpose of this report is for council to schedule a special meeting of council during the 2024 election period to receive the 2023-24 annual report and to adopt the 23-24 financial and performance statements. Councillors, there are various legal requirements the council has in this regard, and particularly the Local Government Act, which requires that the council must report on, and the mayor must report back to the community on the implementation of the council plan at a meeting of council open to the public on a day no later than the day before the election day in the year of an election. The election day being the 26th of October. Furthermore, it's a requirement of the Act that the annual financial statements and performance statement be reported and endorsed by council by the end of September. So, Mr. Mayor, the recommendation is that council holds a special meeting of council virtually at 6 p.m. on Tuesday, the 24th of September 2024, to receive the 2024 annual report and to adopt the 23-24 financial and performance statements.
Move councillor Keogh, seconded councillor Ferrari. Any comments, councillors? The recommendation, those in favour, that is carried. Thank you. Item 12.3.2, the library services. Thank you once again, Mr. Nolan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The purpose of this report is to provide an update on the library services and the community engagement activities in respect of the services for council's consideration. At the June 2024 council meeting, a report was presented to council providing the findings and recommendations from a review conducted of the Frontline Services Business Unit in 2023. At this meeting, council resolved that council approves in principle recommendation 1 within the report that council officers, in consultation with staff and the community, investigate and design an operating model for the resource centres that incorporates an open libraries concept as described within that report that was presented to council. Following that council meeting, there were media reports of misinformation about what council had actually resolved, leading to some fear and concern in the community about whether council had a plan to reduce staff and reduce the library services. Despite attempts to clarify that council did not have such a plan, the fears and concerns remained. And in the August 2024 council meeting, council received a petition that was submitted to Councillor Ferrari and presented at the meeting at the last month's meeting. That petition stated that we, the undersigned, and I'm quoting it in brief, Mr. Mayor, we, the undersigned, respectfully petition the Pyrenees Shire councillors to adequately fund Shire library services and to ensure there are no reductions from present levels of funding, serviced hours, staffing levels, or purchasing of materials. The petition contained 947 signatures, and Mr. Mayor, Councillor Ferrari has received additional signatures. I think there's an additional 29 signatures there in addition to those that were tabled at the last meeting. At the last council meeting, council resolved to receive the petition and present a report back to council, which is effectively what we're doing here now. So it's an opportunity for council to make any decision or provide any direction in respect of that petition. Secondly, during August 2024, community engagement was undertaken on the library services in accordance with the council resolution to engage with the community, particularly around the matter of the open libraries concept. And the open libraries concept was an additional service over and above their current level of service, which did not provide for any change to staffing levels or operating hours. In-person engagement sessions were held and feedback via council's engagement hub was also available. And the general feedback in the library services was open from the 12th of August to the 30th of August. So there were a number of in-person engagement sessions that were advertised and held and generally well received and well attended. In addition to that, council has received a number of submissions to a survey that was circulated, and a copy of the responses to the survey have been circulated to councillors and are an attachment to this report. In summary, the survey, the residents were asked to respond to about 19 questions, and of the 126 responses that were received up to the point in which this report was prepared, and noting that some hard copy responses may have been received since then, there were 126 responses. About 60% of those responses indicated they were over the age of 64 years old. 71% of the responses were female. 90% of the respondents were existing library members. 60% of the respondents used the services at least twice weekly. Use of the static libraries is spread across the day, with morning hours received more use. Respondents reported using the libraries for a broad range of purposes. And just reminding about some of those purposes, they included things like obviously borrowing books, use of computers and the use of technology, access to the internet, access to information, newspapers and the likes, and also to attend events and activities that are held in the library. So there's a range of uses, and respondents reported the varying uses that they attended. Respondents also reported a high level of satisfaction with the current services. In respect of the facilities, they were ranked 8.86 out of 10. In respect of the range of books and resources, they were given a score of 8.59 out of 10. And in respect of respondents' experience with staff assistance when they required it, they ranked the staff assistance at 9.5%, at 9.5 out of 10, which is a great recommendation for the quality of the services provided by our staff. In respect of the specific open libraries concept, 35% of the respondents said that they would be likely to use the facilities outside of hours under an open libraries model if that was offered. And an open libraries model is a model whereby registered users of the facility can be inducted and registered and have access to the facilities outside of the ordinary open hours in an unstaffed scenario. And there were 35% of the respondents that indicated that they would likely use those facilities in that scenario. If the facilities were accessible outside the current ordinary hours under an open libraries model, the most likely hours that would be of use to the respondents was on weekends between 1 o'clock and 5 o'clock and on weekdays between 5 and 8 p.m. Respondents indicated they would require access to be restricted to just registered and inducted users, and only in a scenario where there was a level of security, an appropriate level of security through security cameras that were remotely operated. In respect of the existing services, the most popular change, suggestion, improvement was a greater range of books and resources, and further individual comments and suggestions in respect of the services, including the mobile service, were also provided for consideration. The survey data is a valuable resource and a guide for future service provision. The open libraries model received a cautious but sufficient level of support for council to consider a trial to be undertaken, providing that appropriate measures are in place and in order to make static library facilities accessible for a broader range of people outside the ordinary staffed hours, which is consistent with council's council plan and its principles around inclusion. And it'll be a matter for council to determine as to whether or not you think that level of interest in an open libraries concept is sufficient for council to take a further step to move to a trial. Having said that 35% said that they would likely use it, the remaining 65% said that they were unlikely to use it. In addition to the above, council has been successful with a funding application of approximately $200,000 to undertake improvements to the static library facilities to make them more contemporary and user-friendly. Among the intended improvements are improving the type and versatility of shelving and the entrance at the Evoca facility. So there's an opportunity for council to improve these facilities, regardless of what decision council might make in respect of the open libraries concept. A further sort of consideration for council in this regard is the fact that council is also undertaking consultation at the moment, which we expected to close this week, with our business operators in respect of our visitor information services, which is an important service that stems from our resource centres and will be guided by further input from our business community around those aspects. In respect of the petition It is evident from the level of participation that the community value the library services highly. And while there is currently no plan by council to alter the staffing levels or the ordinary hours of the service, the community sentiment should reasonably be considered when making decisions about future budgets. Mr. Mayor, there are financial and risk implications that are noted in the report as well. The library services, including the Beaufort and Voca library services, are budgeted in our council's current budget to continue as they have been in the past, at an approximate cost of around $500,000 per annum. This cost excludes the estimated visitor information component. It's specifically referencing the library component. And approximately 25% of that cost is supported by the state government's operating grant, which has remained static for the last 3 years, while costs continue to increase in the order of 4% per annum. And that's a consideration for council and future council budgets. The financial sustainability of the current servant model will require further consideration in future councils. And part of that consideration might be the opportunity to consider some value-adding services within the resource centres that might actually generate some revenue, which assist in providing that financial sustainability. But that's perhaps a discussion for another day. In conclusion, councillors, I have made a recommendation, but essentially these are issues which there is a lot of passionate interest by the community, and I suggest that you give strong consideration to the messages from our community. And by no means does my recommendation need to be the one that the council endorses. I'll leave it to the council to debate that. But my recommendation is that council firstly acknowledges the level of participation in the petition received and reinforce that it is currently has no plan to reduce staffing or service levels. Secondly, the council acknowledges and thanks the respondents to the library survey for their feedback on the services and refers that feedback to the library management for consideration. Acknowledges and thanks the current resource centre and library staff for the valuable service, and provides in principle support for an open library model unstaffed outside ordinary hours on a trial basis to complement the current library service once appropriate measures are in place.
Thank you, Mr. CEO. We have a recommendation, councillors. Somebody prepared to, Councillor Clark.
Can I move an alternate, please, Mr. Mayor?
Okay.
Shannon, I'm sure you can't kind of put that up, can you? I'd just like to change slightly parts 1 and parts 4 of the recommendation. And part one would read that the council thank the petitioners for their submission to council and confirm that library services will continue without change for the current financial year. Part 2 and part 3 are unchanged, and part 4 would say seeks a further report from council officers as to the logistics of implementing a trial of the open library model in the next term of council.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Ferrari. You now wish to just...
If I could just speak, Mr. Mayor. So I think councillors, we're here today. It's not kind of, the pathway wouldn't have been the path we've chosen, but that is our reality. We're here today in that sense of things. But I thank the people who've actively participated either in the survey or in the petition, and particularly in the open sessions that we've had at the libraries. What I see is that we've heard very strongly from a key cohort of our people. They like what they've got, and that's good. And we need to retain those features to look after that group of the community. But what I also see we have a service that is underutilised. It's particularly underutilised by a younger cohort of people. And that is very much what we're trying to target with the open libraries concept. We want to work on a different way to build that use. I think what we've heard from our existing users are that they like what they've got, and that's really fair, and we should keep that. But that doesn't stop us from trying new things in addition to that. Hence, the recommendation before us, or the motion now is, if you look at part 1, it is the best assurance that council can offer to those people who petitioned us. We soon will be in caretaker mode. There will soon be a new council, but this budget is set and this year is set. And I can say absolutely honestly that none of us as councillors have had a discussion about reducing services around this table. There's been no discussion in this councillor group around that, in that sense of things. Also, if we were to do that, we would not do that without consultation. That's how we operate. So that's the second part of that. Part 2 is self-explanatory. Part 3, again, I want to build on what the petitioners have said and the surveyors have said about our great staff. We have terrific staff and they provide a terrific service, and I want to acknowledge that. Part 4 is really to get council officers now to do the work to bring to us how we might do something new and something different. Because in the city and Banyule Council, they've done it and expanded. In Yarriambiack, in the middle of the Wimmera, where their towns are even smaller than both at Avoca, they've done it and it works. So open libraries have achieved this. Open libraries have an opportunity for us, and they have an opportunity alongside what we have. And I think in that sense, that's how we should proceed, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Ferrari.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to firstly thank all the community members who signed the petition, which was tabled at the previous meeting, and also the additional tabling of some other signatures to the current meeting, and also the people that made the effort to turn up to the community consultation meetings and made comments online. So you have been heard, and that's why we're discussing this at length and probably making some little different options about moving forward. I'd just like to make it clear that I'm not opposed to a trial for an open library model, but I'd like to see prior to this occurring something like the following to apply. A thorough risk assessment be undertaken in relation to any perceived issues, and mitigation strategies be provided and explored in respect to Beaufort and Avoca. So, yes, we might want to have an open library trial. I'm not opposed to that, but let's have a look at what some of those risks with doing that might be, and let's get some ideas and put some things in place, if we can, to mitigate those risks before we start the trial. I think it'd be good to consultation be undertaken with other municipalities that have either have this concept running or have trialled it and identified risks and issues and what they have devised to mitigate those risks. So we don't necessarily need to reinvent the wheel. Someone might have already invented it. So let's make contact with them and say, hey, did you have any issues? If so, what were they? And what did you do to mitigate them? So some of the work might be already done for us. Service levels, along with current staffing levels, are maintained as mentioned. And, I'd just like again to be clear that at no time has the service levels or the reduction in staff or services ever been discussed or agreed to at this point. It just hasn't happened. So I just want to be very clear on that. Consultation continue with the community, and particularly with the library users. That's really, really important. We've got a good communication stream going at the moment. Let's continue it and let's keep talking to each other, and we'll come up with the best results. That's what always happens when we have that good, clear consultation and communication lines. And as Mr. Nolan mentioned earlier, perhaps there is a possibility for avenues to be explored where additional revenue could be raised through these facilities through like a co-location of services or something like that. So let's explore that, and I'm sure that's been done in other areas too. So again, I don't think it's about reinventing the wheel. So no, that's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ferrari. Councillor Keogh.
Again, along the same lines, gosh, our libraries are precious resources, and it is wonderful that so many are so passionate about this service. So thank you again to those that have responded in person, online. It's so wonderful for you to put that time in. Also thanks for the terrific feedback and thanks to all the amazing staff that we do have in our libraries. They're truly amazing, and we're really thankful for the great job they do. So yeah, I'm just looking forward to continuing to the great use ahead for our libraries, and make sure you get out there and use them, because they are wonderful and we want to grow them and grow the access to everyone across the Shire to them. Thank you.
Councillor Eason.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. As like our other councillors, I really want to thank the respondents to our survey and to the petitioners. We've got over 900 people bothered to sign the petition asking council to maintain what we've got. And I've never heard of a petition of over 900 people in this Shire. I think we got to 700, the last Avoca one. So that's fantastic. But they're asking us to do what we're doing.
Yeah.
And that's great. Now we want to look at what more we can give our community and look at what that is going to be for the community. And again, I think that's wonderful too. The issue I have with this whole process is the miscommunication that was out there in the community that forced these people to think we were going to do something that was never on the cards. At no point were we reducing the existing library situation or staff, hours, anything. So in future, please be aware that when the council says it's not doing something or it is doing something, that's what's happening. Don't listen to the whisperers or the others in the community that have a vexed interest or want to cause trouble. Listen to what the council says. If you're not sure about that, come and ask the council. Don't listen to the whisperers. It's caused a lot of angst for over 900 people that was totally unnecessary.
Thank you, councillor Eason. I guess it'd be wise of me not to say a great deal other than to back up everything that's been said. I know through my course of life that there is always a fear of the unknown, but there are no unknowns at this stage of the piece, has been stated. Everything is as was. If we can improve the service, so be it. And harking back to Councillor Clark's comments, it's already been tried in 2 other areas that I'm familiar with, and it's worked famously. So let's hope that the new council can make a decision that suits everybody and be assured that currently it is funded till the end of June 2025. So there's no changes before then, despite what might happen. I'll put the motion. Those in favour? That is carried. Thank you. Tiny Towns Fund. Thank you, Mr. Nolan.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Just on a slightly lighter note, this is a funding opportunity for council through the Tiny Towns Fund. This is round 2 of this program, and there is an opportunity for council and for community groups to put forward proposals for funding up to $50,000 for projects that might fit the eligibility criteria to improve towns up to a population of 5,000 people. So all our towns actually qualify. And in round 1, there were 3 of our towns that were actually successful with funding applications. The reason for bringing this to council, though, is also to acknowledge the fact that applications closed during the caretaker period, and at this point in time, the potential projects are still being explored. So we're not in a position to seek specific direction from council in respect of any individual applications, but applications that are to be submitted by councils are required to have a small co-contribution, and as such, council sort of seek. The recommendation is that council endorses funding application to be made to the Tiny Towns Club, with any unbudgeted co-contributions to be endorsed by the newly elected council should the project application be successful.
Thank you, Mr. Nolan. You've heard the recommendation. Move Councillor Eason, second Councillor Keogh. Any comments, councillors? No, I'll put the recommendation. Those in favour, that is carried.
Much lighter note.
We move to item 13, councillor reports. We'll start with you, councillor Clark.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. So just in terms of this last month of council, I've attended both my external board meetings. I represent council on the Highlands Land and CVGA. CVGA particularly is doing some really significant heavy lifting at the moment in the policy areas around both the consultation and development of transmission lines and wind farms, but more particularly about community benefits and how they might flow to affected communities in that sense. And that's really valuable work in terms of helping us. I know we've considered that at council as well in that sense. I've attended a number of MAB and Rural Councils Victoria's events, and next week I'll actually be in Canberra at the National Emergency Management Authority's forecast effectively for this bushfire season, but will also give me the opportunity to pursue council's discussion that we had earlier around recovery and the fact that how poorly the system is working for small rural councils like us in terms of getting money. I attended the Warburg Community Cuppa, and the item of the water reserve, of course, was raised and spoken about extensively, and thank you to council for considering that tonight. And finally, we also had the Warburg Community Hub AGM, which of course is a committee of management of council assets committee. We have a number of young mums in our community. They nearly all put their hands up to join the hub committee. They've got a very specific interest in the moment, getting a new playground there. They're doing some really, really good work. And absolutely to be encouraged both by the hub group and also by council. So that's all from me. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Clark. We'll go to councillor Easton. We'll change the pattern. Just when you thought you were last.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr Mayor. I attended the annual meeting for the Avoca Food Pantry, an organisation with the Beaufort Food Pantry that work across our shire in the background. They don't get out there in front of everybody else, but they're a wonderful group of volunteers providing urgent and necessary needs to our community. And I congratulate them for continuing on that wonderful service. Attended a couple of the library community engagement sessions, which were very, very enlightening. The Councillor Cuppa at Lexington. The Sunraysia Highway Committee meeting, again, another group of people behind trying to get our roads in better condition than they currently are. State government isn't necessarily full of funds at the moment to try and help, but they do things when they can, and that committee gives them a lead as to what we consider to be urgent. And attended a citizenship ceremony here the other day, which was lovely to see a young mother from across the ditch become an Australian citizen, something that makes an important part of what council's about. Citizenship ceremonies, they're very, very important. And Mr Mayor, congratulations on your lengthy term in council. It's been an honour to be on council with you for my 12 years.
Thank you. Councillor Keogh.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Again, along with the other councillors, it was wonderful to catch up with everyone at the Warburg Community Cuppa, and then to head up to Natty Yallock just last week and see the amazing, beautiful countryside up there. And it is amazing, I think, just how diverse and how amazing our shire is, and we're very blessed to live in this part of the country. I also attended one of the library consultations here in Beaufort, and again, a thank you to all those people that turned up to those consultations and let us know feedback in other ways as well. Last week too, in the Mount Emu ward, we had another leg of the awesome little Beaufort Connect Tiny Halls tour. So it was a success again at the Lake Goldsmith Hall this time last Friday, with the attendees thoroughly enjoying a beautiful evening of entertainment and fellowship with the others who were there. Across, again, relating to the beautiful weather that we've had, although it may be bringing out a few snakes. They are on the move a little bit, so be careful. But the crops are looking particularly good, particularly the canola across the ward. The rain was well received though over the weekend. I know farmers were grateful for that. So we continue to hope and pray that the farmers will experience a productive season coming up. We're thinking of you all. Continuing, as we've spoken tonight, about improving our road and bridge network, which we've been actively aiming to do, will assist in, of course, the cropping season. But as that equipment will be moving around on the roads, that will begin soonish, please drive safely and be very careful of that, and bridge access, etc., and crossings. I'd also like a huge congratulations to all the local sporting groups as they wind up their winter season. Congratulations to award winners, best and fairest, etc. But above all, huge thanks to all those amazing volunteers who make these sporting events occur across the Shire. Thanks to the club committees, the coaches, referees, tuck shop teams, parents and friends who get players there, and the support crew that support their communities. I know there's one gentleman who I'm going to embarrass in the gallery who's there every home game here at the Beaufort, collecting the gate fees as they go in and greeting people so warmly, even when the weather isn't warmly. But George, Kirsten, it's awesome to see you every time we rock up to the football there. So thank you to people like you, because it wouldn't happen. And what's important is often groups, as we know, such as our football, netball clubs, they're incredibly important for bringing the community together and creating a social space and a safe space that supports the emotional and mental health often of community members. So again, huge thanks. Also, massive congratulations. Oh my gosh, like council events. I won't say how old I was when we started on council, but what an achievement, like over so many years, and the people that you've impacted, like that's just absolutely mind-blowing, and yeah, what an achievement. So again, it's been great to be on council for the last 12 years, but you've been here a lot longer than I have, and I'm sure had such an impact. So congratulations again.
Thank you, Tony.
He probably knows all you children.
Yeah.
Councillor Ferrari.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Like the other councillors, attended the cuppers in the chat and up to Natty, and had to note that the oval was looking pretty good up there, and there was a couple of people training, so that was good. Had some constituent meetings regarding the library services and the activities, strangely enough, because it's been a pretty hot topic over the last couple of months, but it's good that people are still interested. They're still making contact and wanting to know what's going on and having that communication, and I encourage people to keep doing that, and then if they've got the most current information, they're going to be up to date with what is actually happening and what's not actually happening. So it's important we keep that communication lines going. I've had a few inquiries also about and discussions from constituents regarding the ongoing recovery matters. And I think it's important to highlight it's not too late for assistance for people, and don't hesitate to ask for help if they need it, because you're absolutely entitled to it. And, you know, as I said to the people that I've spoken to, and I'll say again tonight, the incident usually occurs quite quickly, but the recovery can be ongoing for quite a long time. That's just the nature of how it is and what happens. And the incident happens really quickly, but recovery takes a long time, and that's not uncommon. That's just how it is. So just hang in there and don't be afraid to ask for help if needed. I'd like to congratulate both the football netball clubs. Had a really tough year, and they've battled through and got through to the end of the year. But I'd really like to congratulate the A grade netballers and the under 13 netballers for making the finals. They're both out now, but it was a really brave effort to battle on. And they really just battled hard and made it probably above where everyone's expected them to make it to. So congratulations to the A grade netballers and the under 13 netballers, and I'm sure it's going to set you in good stead for next year. And lastly, but not leastly, I'd like to congratulate Rob Vance, the Mayor, for his long-term service as Ward Councillor for the Cameron Ward. It's an amazing feat. And I can mention that he's still very passionate about our communities, and especially those within his ward. So even though he might be stepping down as a councillor, he's still very, very passionate about our area, in particular his own little patch. And I don't think that's ever going to go out of him. So that's a really, over that long period of time, that's a just unbelievable feat. I also like to thank Rob for his advice, guidance and support to me during his time that we've shared on the council, and we've had many good conversations, especially whilst travelling in the car, and they're not always about council, but we've had some really good conversations. But Rob's been really good support to me with some really good sound, level-headed advice, and I just can't thank him enough for that. And I wish Rob all the best for the future. And again, thank you for your outstanding service.
Thank you.
Excuse me, Mr. Mayor. May I just make a comment? My apologies for breaking into your thing. Just in respect to the recovery activities that Councillor Ferrari mentioned, as he said, that it's not too late to still come forward with needs that you might have. I just wanted to say that we have a recovery drop-in centre every Wednesday at the Beaufort Library. So if anyone does have any new needs or anything that they want to talk through, they can come to that. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Bramwell. That's been a relief for me. It's taken a little bit of pressure off to soak in the kind words from my co-councillors. Thank you very much for that. During the last month, I attended a local government mayoral advisory panel meeting in Melbourne with the other 9 people that were put on this committee to advise the Minister for Local Government. I think it wasn't totally a waste of time, but it was close at some stages. I'm sure the Minister had her mind made up, and but it was good to mix with other councillors and hear their thoughts about what was happening in local government world. Following that meeting, I had to drive all the way from Bacchus Marsh to Trewool, which is the other side of Seymour, for a rural councils forum. We had a wonderful gathering there and a great forum, I'm sure. And even though, as you walk this lifetime, I heard somebody say that probably not what you do, but it's the memories that you make that stick with you. And to be recognised by your peers is always, I suppose, rewarding for the efforts that you put in. It was nice to be recognised by the RCV for the time that I'd served there. The following week, I went off down to Warragul and with the Timber Towns group that I'd also been involved with for a very long time. And to be recognised by them, I was presented with a piece of red gum wood, a foot block with a lovely plaque on it. I must bring it along at some stage and let you all have a view of that. But that was also very rewarding and a great memory to carry. We had our AGM after the forum on the Wednesday. Then, like everybody else, I was at Lexington where the group turned up for a cuppa and a chat. Had the library's engagement session. Had a virtual meeting with rural councils the following week, and then on the Sunday had the privilege of attending the Vietnam Veterans Memorial Service at Ararat. Great to catch up with the vets. And it was a well-attended service, which was really pleasing to see. We had our GBAC meeting in Ballarat that Jim and I attended. And then on the 22nd, I went off to Melbourne to the mayors and CEOs and for the MAV delegates networking night. And then the next day, the State Council meeting. And then, as Ron said, we had a citizenship ceremony here in this very chamber on the second last day of August, where we welcomed a young mother from Snake Valley, lovely girl with 3 great kids that were bouncing around, full of life. And as Ron said, she was from over the Dutch, a very strong New Zealander accent. but certainly a lovely woman. Now I'm going to indulge you just for a short period while I read out a message that I want to deliver as my last. This is my last ordinary council meeting as Mayor of the Pyrenees Shire, and the last as your councillor for the D. Cameron riding. I want to use this opportunity to say a few words. I'd like to thank my fellow councillors and all the staff that I've worked with over the years, and to highlight a few achievements that this council has delivered in this current term. We developed and adopted the council plan for 21 to 25, and the council vision was informed by a deliberative engagement process involving a diverse range of our residents. And this plan has provided the key, big word, strategic direction for council during this term of council. Roads and bridges are our biggest expenditure, as was explained tonight. We've spent almost $40 million in the upgrade and improvements over the 5 years to ensure that our agriculture sector and our residents have a fit-for-purpose transport network that meets their essential access to farms and to their residences. I also want to highlight another essential service which affects every individual resident in the Shire. In this term, Council introduced a universal multi-bin roadside waste collection service, rolled out to every resident in the Shire. This is an incredible uplift in the service standard, and one in which Pyrenees has shown to be an early adapter of the state's circular economy policy objectives. Maintenance and renewal of our building assets is another area where Council has made significant investments in this term. The completion of a $3.8 million Lexington Community Hub, a state-of-the-art recreation and community facility. I was so proud to participate in the official opening with Federal Minister Catherine King and our lovely member for Ripon, Martha Haylett, this year, which saw the culmination of many years of planning to deliver this project for the community, which has recently become known as the Hub Pub. As we all know, the local hotel ceased to operate, so the community building is now being used as a centre for a quiet ale when they need it, and provide facilities for the sporting group as well. During this term of council, we had to make a very difficult decision in ceasing to be providers in home aged care service because of administrative changes at a federal level. Council continues to support active ageing in our community through our community development team, and we will continue to advocate and monitor the delivery of aged care services by other providers to ensure that our elderly community needs are met. Council's library services have been the subject of review this year, and whilst Council has not made any decision to adjust service levels anyway, Council appreciates just how valued the services are by the community. The completion of the Courier Park residential development in Beaufort during the term of this council is the culmination of a 10-year initiative and investment to stimulate housing and to grow our population. Council has further committed to play its part in stimulating housing by purchasing additional land in Beaufort and Avoca for future residential development. We have faced many natural disasters in recent history, and we continue to plan for and respond to and recover from floods, fire, drought and storm. The 22 flood event was widespread across the Shire, and the recovery from this event will be ongoing focus until the damage to our roadwork is restored. The devastating bushfire in February this year saw the loss of many homes, the destruction of both public and private property, and some of our magnificent natural forests. Council remains committed to our communities in our recovery efforts from this devastating event. And whilst trauma and loss were plentiful, Council was firm in its decision to remove a number of hazardous trees from the many roads affected by this fire, This difficult decision was made to ensure council met its responsibilities in keeping our road users and our community safe. Whilst this was not a popular decision by some, it was nevertheless the most responsible decision in the interest of public safety and to restore safe access for residents and businesses. While I don't propose to speak to all the services and highlights of this council term or my term as councillor, I would like to recognise the committed and talented staff that support council and deliver the council vision. This workforce is one of, if not the smallest workforces of any local government in Victoria, and yet this team continues to deliver excellent services. And I would like to thank each and every one of them for their contribution in making a difference in the Pyrenees communities. Council recently made a decision to reappoint our current Chief Executive Officer for a further term after an extensive review process. Council decided that Jim is the best person to guide our council and lead our organisation to continue the delivery of council's long-term vision for the community. While there are many challenges ahead for the new council soon to be elected, there are also many reasons to be hopeful that the future of the Pyrenees is bright with magnificent landscapes, productive land and wonderful communities. Our council and the organisation stand together to continue to lead and serve you into the future. I just want to reminisce for just a short time on things that are special to me. Back in 1994, and leading up to 94, when amalgamations were being discussed, I spent a fair bit of time with Councillor Lyle Driscoll and our former Shire Secretary Ken Shearer in the Avoca Shire, lobbying state government in producing what is now known as the Pyrenees Shire. We looked at options. We looked at the Northern Grampians, town of Stawell and St Arnaud, and we looked at Maryborough, and we looked at Ararat, that were towns all around us, and decided we wanted to create a rural council. We didn't want the influence of the big city centres, or as we thought those days, 10,000 people was a fairly large city. So after some long deliberations and consulting with, I can clearly remember going to Ballarat and meeting at the Mid-City Motel with Stephen Elder and Rob Knowles, who was the current Minister for Health, and putting the pressure on to allow us to create a rural council. And we see the result today. They, at that stage, said, we'll give you 2 years to see how it works. And if it's successful, you're good to go. If you're not, you'll be amalgamated with the larger centres. That was one occasion that I feel very proud about. And also, we went off to Mortlake when the announcements were made after 18 months of commissioner operation to say that the new Shire would be released, and I had the privilege of moving that it be called the Pyrenees Shire. And the late Marjorie Oddie seconded that motion. Marjorie was from the Ripon Shire. So that's a little bit of history that I feel very proud about, and a few projects that I've been involved with over the years. 2 resource centres that have been developed. We purchased the Avoca site of the Maryborough Knitting Mills and created the Avoca Resource Centre, and we purchased the Beaufort Resource Centre off Witherspoon Motors and created that also. Both today, very great centres that promote our region. I can recall Catherine King, who is now the Minister for Local Government in the federal government, when she was first setting out in her adventures to join federal politics, she was We twisted our arm a little bit because we needed a new pavilion at the Avoca Racecourse. And that was one of the promises that we got out of the former member, John Mildren, that he would come up with the money if they got over the line. Well, as luck happened, we got a new centre at the racecourse in Avoca, so that was great. To see the wind farms come into the region, we've seen Warburg develop, we've seen our Stockyard Hill wind farm come to reality. We've seen the Crowlands wind farm come to reality. I was involved with the advisory group with the Ararat wind farm when it was brought about. People have mixed feelings about the wind farms, but it is the future and we can't deny the future. I was involved with the development of the lands for water supply, going to Wattle Creek, where the treatment plant's been placed on a property that I owned some years ago. I've been involved with the development of the wineries in the Moonabel and Landsborough region, and I have a great deal of pride in the fact that I mixed rub shoulders with the likes of John Robb and Wal Henning and other developers that were the early days. Mark Summerfield now is a real champion of the area, and our wineries are world renowned, which is great. And I want to finish up by once again thanking all the councillors and the staff that I work with. It's not going to be easy. You know, I've loved local government and all the people I've worked with. And I've really got to thank my wife. And my family for the support that they've given me over almost 37 years. So with that, thank you all. Right, we better go back to the business now.
Mr Mayor, I didn't get the chance to before my other councillors preempted me, but I was going to move a formal vote of thanks to you to record in the minutes. We've kind of just done that, but I'd also like to add my words to theirs. I think you're right, it is 37 years since you started.
Yep.
I've got you down 6 terms of Pyrenees. I'm not sure Avoca.
Yeah,
one. So 7 terms as mayor in that sense of things. And you mentioned some of them, but you've missed a couple that really stand out to me. Your commitment to the rural community and commitment to roads, but I think your commitment to telecommunications, particularly those 2 towers at Landsborough and Moonabel, I remember very, very well. And you've also talked very much about your commitment to growing the municipality. And Corrie Park's one, but I think growing the industry of the municipality, and I think about things like Pyrenees Shire and those kind of things as well in that sense. But back to you as a person, I think you had a profound influence on all of us here. You're practical, you're absolutely no nonsense, you tell as you see it. And that was no more evident than this year in the fires, in your dealing with the community and with the media in that sense of things. Now, we're a bit different to what we were when we started. We've now got phones, we've now got Zoom and all that kind of thing. But as a farmer, the bit I'd like to finish on is the little bit of reality that you bring to those things that you do when you're on Zoom as a farmer, particularly for our city cousins. You just can't imagine that you'd actually come to them from the woolshed, out carting water or out feeding the sheep and cattle, that kind of thing. It's an amazing sense of reality of how our life works out here that they don't get, except through their entree dealing with you. So, again, just to add my comments to the other councillors, thank you very much.
Thank you. Right, we move to item 14, confidential items. And I require a motion or a recommendation that the meeting be closed to members of the public in accordance with section 4.1.1 of Council's governance rules and section 66 of the Local Government Act 2020 in order to discuss the confidential reports listed below, Beaufort Lake Caravan Park accommodation upgrade. So, move, thank you. Seconded, Councillor Ferrari.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Thank you.
Good, thank you.
Well done, Bobby.
Thank you.
You don't look that
Thanks.
old.
Off air.